Hello and welcome to the Car Care Nut channel. In today's video, we're going to be talking about the 2014 to 2019 Toyota Highlander. We're going to be talking about some common problems, things to look for when you're buying one, or things to know about if you own one. We're also going to be covering the hybrid models toward the end of the video, so stay tuned for that. Before we get started, subscribe to the channel, hit that thumbs up button, turn on your bell notifications. Also, follow the channel on Instagram and Facebook to get sneak peeks for future videos. But without further ado, let's get right to it. Starting with engine problems. Now, there are two, or let's say three engines in this car. First, there is the early V6. This went from 2014 all the way to 2016. Then in 2017 to 2019, there was an updated V6, even though it's a similar engine, but a lot of things were added to it, and we'll go into that in a little bit. Now, the third engine is a 4-cylinder, although very rare, but that's also an engine option. The hybrid model has technically the same engine, same problem, so we'll cover that as well. Now, one of the main problems with this engine, and this is something you can Google, you probably heard about, or if you don't know, you need to know this. Both of the engines from all the way from 2014 to 2019 are notorious for oil leaks. I mean, usually oil leaks are not a big problem, but in this particular car, in order to fix the most common oil leak, which is the front timing cover, you have to drop the whole engine down, as you can see in this picture. Now, the oil leaks are horrible. I mean, I've seen ones that are almost new and they're leaking oil already. Now, I'm not going to go into why and what. It's a sealer, it fails, manufacturing problems. I'm just here to tell you that they are super common and very expensive to fix. So, if you are buying a Highlander from 2014 all the way to 2019, the first thing you should do is check for leaks. It's very simple on this car, as you can see in this video. This is how you're going to inspect for leaks. That area has to be dry. If it is wet with oil, either do not buy the car or negotiate, or if the car has a warranty, make sure you get that taken care of before you buy it. Now, if you have a car already, I suggest you pause this video, run to your car, do the same inspection. If your car is leaking, it's under warranty, get it fixed as soon as possible. If you're out of warranty, this is going to be a costly repair. Now, although it's not going to leak a measurable amount where the engine is going to run out of oil, but it's going to be dripping oil everywhere, it's going to make a mess, cover the whole engine with oil. In some extreme cases, you get some smoke as the oil builds up and gets thrown on the exhaust. But again, I always say you should shop around. This is not a job you want someone who is not experienced to do. So make sure you shop around for prices, get the best deal out there for the best work possible, because this is kind of a big job. Another common leak on these engines, and this used to be only 14 to 16, but now it covers the whole range as we start seeing the newer redesigned engine leak coolant from the water pump as well. The leak is a water pump leak, or it's a noise from the water pump. Here's the water pump for this car. It has a funky shape, just turns. Engine turns this, cycles water through the engine, coolant through the engine. Very simple. Unfortunately, there are two problems with this pump. One of them is coolant leaks. It leaks coolant right here. All of a sudden, your coolant starts coming down, and some of them leak pretty bad. Another problem is there's a bearing right here inside that fails, and the common issue with it is you will get a rattling noise. All of a sudden, there's like a huge rattling noise from the engine, goes up and down with the RPM. So if you're buying one, make sure you get that checked. It's a little harder to check these sometimes for leaks, but always check the coolant level. Also, make sure you don't hear any abnormal noises. It's going to be a loud, rattling type noise that if you rev the car, it goes up and down with it. That's an indication that the water pump has failed, and these can get a little expensive to replace. So again, if you own one of these cars, you know, they are possible to DIY yourself, to replace it yourself, but it's a little bit more involved than your average water pump. So Keep an eye on these water pumps and make sure you take care of them, because we have seen some that overheat when customers neglect them and they never get replaced and the coolant drops low enough. Additional oil leaks that are somewhat common on the newer redesigned V6, which now we're talking about 2017 to 2019 Highlanders. These are not very common and they're very simple to fix, but the vacuum pump loves to leak oil. Now, the first oil leak I showed you in the front of the engine, this oil leak would be on the opposite side. A little harder to find in an inspection, but if you have, I always recommend you have your car inspected before you buy it. If you already own one, it will be a mysterious oil leak. It looks like on top of the transmission area. But again, this is not a big leak that I'm too worried about. It's not expensive to repair. It's just a little gasket and that's it. So something to know about this engine. Another engine that we're going to talk about is the 4-cylinder. People, please, it's not worth it. This is a pretty big SUV. Having a 4-cylinder in the first place, that means you can't fill the car and expect to go on a trip to Colorado going up and down the mountains, because the engine is simply underpowered for a car this big and this heavy. The other thing is not great for towing. We've seen a lot of oil consumption problems, underpower problems, all kinds of complaints. Now, if you already own a 4-cylinder, you already know exactly what I'm talking about, but they're good engines. They have a habit of burning oil if they're not maintained properly. All these Highlanders, I highly recommend you switch to a 5,000 mile oil change. You can check out my video on how to maintain your Toyota. I talk a little bit more about that. But these are the issues. I highly recommend the V6. If you own a 4-cylinder, you already know what I'm talking about, but they really don't have that many problems if the maintenance is kept. One more thing on the engine category. The 2017 to 2019 models had the start-stop technology. Now, yeah, I know I don't like those at all. I don't want my car shut off. I don't know, I'm a little old school. I don't like the car to shut off. To me, that's a problem, but that's the emission requirements that we need. And most people will question the starter. They say, well, the starter is going to fail prematurely. That's not the case. Two things are affected by this system. The starter has a life, and according to Toyota, it's 382,000 starts on the starter that it needs to be replaced. Not 383, not 381, it's 382,000. Don't know why. That number, we did a rough calculation, looks about 9 to 10 years. So you need to replace your starter every 10 years. The starter is not, you would think, oh, it's $2,000 for a starter. It's not. The starter is not super expensive. Yeah, it's more expensive than your average starter, but it's not crazy. So if you need to do it every 10 years, it's not the end of the world. And the other thing is the battery is a special battery, and if you replace it with another one, you got to program it and do all this mess. So if you own a 17 to 19, stick with the original batteries so you wouldn't have any headaches, so the start-stop would work right. Moving on to transmission, and I almost can guarantee you, if you own a 2017 to 2019 Highlander with a new 8-speed transmission, this is what you've been waiting to hear in this video. So before we get into the 8-speed transmission, for everybody, 2014 to 2016 Highlander had a 6-speed automatic transmission. I don't know much about this transmission because they never go bad. They sincerely never go bad. I've never seen one. It's a carryover transmission from the previous year. Yeah, the previous year had some issues with it. But the 14 to 16 Highlanders, they have a bulletproof transmission for as long as you keep up with the maintenance. Again, I have another video for that. I'll link it below. Now let's talk about the 8-speed transmission. Now the 8-speed transmission is a good transmission. However, in 2017, when this thing first came out, this is the first year that the Highlanders have an 8-speed transmission. Right around to early 2018s, they had nothing but problems. I mean, we started with software updates, transmission failure. I mean, it was like something abnormal at a Toyota dealership. We never see transmissions. We don't really do that many transmission work or replacement or huge problems like that on such newer cars. 2017 to early 2018, they had a major problem with manufacturing. problems from harsh shifting to whining noises to all kinds of issues. Now, Toyota, being what they are, they moved very swiftly, very quickly, updated the transmission physically inside, and altered the software and resolved this problem completely by mid-2018. If you have a 2017, early 2018 Highlander with an 8-speed, don't freak out, because most likely the issues have already happened while you are under warranty. So basically they're going to change the transmission to a completely different transmission. Still an 8-speed, still looks the same on the outside, but inside is different, and the software will be changed, and you're good to go. Now you have the same transmission as a late 18 and 19. Also, Toyota did extend the warranty on this transmission, just in case, you slip by and go out of warranty and now you have issues with it. You're covered. Don't worry about it. Contact your dealer for more information on the coverage time, and you should have no issues. Another thing on these transmissions that we've seen, not as common and typically due to accidents, but we have seen some, is the 8-speed transmission leak. Now, the 8-speed transmission has an oil pan that's located in the front, and it's of course made out of plastic. That's the new age of car manufacturing. Now, the plastic cracks. It's very simple to crack it. Not really hanging down underneath the car, but we've seen some are cracked and leaking. Kind of an expensive repair because of the location of the oil pan. But if you're shopping around for this car and you're watching this video to know common problems, I would really avoid 17 to early 18s unless it's low miles and has a good warranty still, because that was like the trial year, if you would, for this new transmission. If you have done your research and it has been replaced to a newer one, then you should have no issues. But ideally, go safe. Go buy a late 18 or 2019. They're exactly the same car, and the difference in price is not going to be huge. Moving on to body, and the first item is brake light bulbs. And I know this is something very simple, but we're talking about 2014 to 2016, 17 and up had LED brake lights. For some reason, it's like we had a rush of brake light after brake light after brake light, and it seems like reoccurring. I don't know what's going on with the original bulbs, but this is something to know about. You're going to be replacing a bunch of brake lights on these cars. Another thing is fog lights in the front. Again, they go out all the time. It's just a bulb. It's not expensive. You can even change it yourself, but something to know about. If this annoys you, this is going to happen a lot. You're going to be replacing fog lights, brake lights all the time. Another couple issues with body regarding paint. We've seen some paint peeling issues, and this typically was on newer cars, not much later ones. There was a manufacturing issue. Contact your Toyota dealership. There are some programs by Toyota to cover these issues, but again, if you're buying one, check the paint. Make sure nothing is peeling that is original. Now, car's been in an accident and painted outside. They actually could have fixed the problem with the paint, or they could have painted it in a bad way and now it's worse. So always check the paint. Another thing is the front grille chips and the chrome covering starts peeling and it just looks horrible. It really doesn't affect the car at all. It's not really super expensive, but if you're buying one, it doesn't hurt to look. If it's there, maybe negotiate the price, drop the price down a little bit. Most important issue with body is the power back door or the hatch door. We've had some issues, especially in the early ones. 2014 and 15 seem to be the most, but we've seen scattered across the years. One thing is, never hang on this door. I don't know why I should say this to anybody, but I've seen people hang on these doors, especially kids. They tend to bend, and when they do bend, they won't close right, and now the motor jams, and now you have all kinds of problems, and now it needs to go to a body shop, and the bill just goes from nothing to catastrophic overnight. Now, the back door has two motors, which are the shocks that carry the door up. Usually we don't have problems, but we have seen some where the motor just flat stops working. If one of them stops working, the other can't do the job on its own. This is very expensive to repair. So if you're buying one, make sure that door works properly. Make sure when the door is closed, that both gaps on both ends are even. If the door is bent one way or another, you're gonna have problems, and it's only a matter of time before these shocks stop working, and now the power door doesn't work anymore, and unfortunately you can't bypass this one, not like some of the older ones where you could. This one, it'll be very hard to open, very hard to close, so you can't really say, oh, it broke, I don't want to fix it, let's just use it manually. So something to know about. Moving on to chassis, and we'll start with a couple of issues that were heavily on the 2014 to early 2015s. This was an early production problem. There was a creaking noise from the back of the car, very noticeable over bumps. This was due to a bushing on one of the rear control arms. It was a common problem, most of them were fixed, but if you hear that on a 14 to early 15, that's what it is. I would negotiate the price, not super expensive to fix. Actually, most of them were really fixed under warranty because it was such a horrible creak. Another thing that we've seen on early 2014 to 2015 is rear shocks would leak prematurely, pretty bad, and they make noise over bumps. The shocks are very cheap on these cars and they're very easy to replace. You can even DIY if you own one or you're buying one with a leak in shocks. Something to look for. Moving on to brakes on this car in the chassis section. Now, if you own one of these cars, you know that brake vibration is super common on these cars. Now, if you drive all city, heavy braking all the time, you're gonna warp the front rotors. That's just a common problem because of the weight of this car. It's always gonna keep happening over and over and over. No matter what you do it's gonna come back. So something to be aware of. If this annoys you very much, this might not be the car for you, although it's a great SUV. You're going to be replacing rotors, resurfacing rotors. Resurfacing rotors works less. I would just replace the rotors. You can use OEM, you can use aftermarket. Regardless, it's going to come back. So it's not a matter of quality. It's just the way that it's one Achilles heel for this car. Another thing with brakes, and this is an odd one for these cars, the rear brakes seem to wear faster than the front. Usually we end up replacing the front brakes because they vibrate and the owner just says, you know what, let's just put new pads too in the front when we replace those rotors. But the rear brakes, you got to keep an eye on them because they will wear faster than the front. The last item in chassis is going to be the limited models with the fancy clad wheels. Now that sounds like a very fancy term. It is unfortunately an aluminum wheel with a glued on plastic cover. Looks great. It is actually a very high quality cover and doesn't look like a hubcap. But one thing to know about these is you cannot replace this plastic cover separate from the whole wheel. And the whole wheel is pretty expensive. Now when you go change your tires, that's a problem because if they get scratched, now you're replacing the whole wheel because you can't fix it. It's a plastic piece, not like any other full aluminum wheel. If you're buying one, make sure they're not scratched. Make sure that doesn't have pieces missing off of it. I'll put a picture so you can see this wheel again. This comes on the limited and the platinum models. So something to know about. You're not really buying fancy aluminum wheels. They're really an aluminum wheel with a plastic thing glued on it. Moving on to electrical, and again, like all new Toyotas, radio problems. I mean, they are really bad on this model. You'll have rebooting problems, you'll have freezing up, not working with the phone, things logging up, apps not working. There's constant updates for these things. Every time, it seems like every time you update your phone, now there's problems until there's an update for the car and you just keep going back and forth. Unfortunately, these radios are pretty expensive to replace original. You can go aftermarket. If you're buying one of these cars, make sure you test that radio, connect your phone, make sure the Bluetooth works right. Common thing is once you connect your Bluetooth, the radio starts rebooting continuously. That either means your software in the phone is not compatible or the software in the car is not compatible, and now you're running to the dealer, calling whoever your phone manufacturer is and going back and forth. It's really annoying, but it's something, there's no other alternative to it. Something to know if you're really into the tech stuff. This is gonna annoy you and there's not really a way around it. You have to continue to keep up with the updates from the dealership and everything else, and that's just the way it is with these radios. One top tip though, if you have a problem with the radio, the first thing you should do before you drive to your dealership or repair shop or even online looking for answers, you should delete your car from your phone, then delete your phone from your car, do a delete personal information or data from the car, and then repair everything. That seems to fix most of the issues. But if you have an older phone, they're not very compatible, and that's going to be a problem until you move on to a newer phone. If you have a very new phone, like some of the very new iPhone Pros, they're having some issues. They're going to come up with an update. As of the time of filming this video, that we are having some issues with the iPhone Pros, but I'm sure Toyota will come up with an update and that will fix that. One more thing, less related to the radio, but still, the hands-free microphone is terrible on this car. All the years, all the models, people constantly complain about the other person on the line when I'm driving and I'm talking on the hands-free. They can't hear me very well. Yes, there is a little setting where you can kind of change it, but just get ready, because this thing is not great. Your voice will be muffled, not really very clear. If you change the setting, now it's echoey. So if talking hands-free clearly is very important, unfortunately this car will disappoint you. That's just, again, another Achilles heel for this car. Let's talk about Highlander hybrids. Now, this is one of the most solid SUV hybrids out there. There's really not that many problems with them. The only thing you need to be aware of is the maintenance is a little bit more than your regular gasoline Highlander. You're going to need to maintain that fan filter. Again, I'll link to my how to maintain Toyota video for more details. Another thing you gotta do additional is the coolant for the hybrid system. We're not talking big dollar items. We're just talking a little bit of additional stuff. But these things are solid. They have zero problems as long as the proper maintenance is kept. One thing, precaution with all SUV hybrids, not just the Highlander, the battery happens to live, the high voltage battery, lives underneath the back seat. So don't plan to spill water or a lot of fluid in that area, because it could make its way inside the high voltage battery, totaling the car at that point, because things get really bad when you get water inside the high voltage battery. Now, saying the best year to buy for this model is a little bit hard because of the 8-speed, and they're kind of like two models. If I was buying a Highlander today, I would, without hesitating, buy late 2015 to 2016. They're great cars. Yes, they have some Achilles heels, but I think compared to other manufacturers and other competitors, this is one of the best buys. And you notice the price doesn't really drop that much on these things. They're just awesome. They're very smooth, they're very quiet, they're very refined. Now, if you want the latest and the greatest, avoid 2017 altogether, unless you're buying one with a warranty and you're very familiar with the problems with the transmission. So if it hasn't been done, you know when you have an issue and you can take it in and get it taken care of. Otherwise, mid 18 to 19, I think these are the best years to buy for them. And before we wrap up this video, I'd like to say once more, make sure if you're buying one or owning one, you gotta check the oil leaks. I mean, this is a very bad and very common thing with these cars. This is the number one. Everything else, yes, it's nice to check and whatever, but this is the number one issue. I mean, we're talking about $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 to fix this out of pocket. You do not want to be that person who just bought a car, paid a small fortune for it, and now there's a puddle of oil in your driveway, and now you're chasing after who's going to fix it and what not. And now if you own one of these cars and you have warranty, whether it's extended warranty, factory warranty, you need to check it right now. If it's leaking, you need to get it fixed as soon as possible. Now, the fixes are good. I've fixed hundreds, if not thousands of these engines. I've never really had one come back leaking, but it needs to be done by a competent mechanic. Even the dealership will sometimes have not very good mechanics, so make sure you talk to your service advisor, talk to your whoever mechanic is fixing your car. Make sure you emphasize the importance that this is done right. I hope this video was helpful, informative for you. I hope you find something useful or something you didn't know about. Please consider subscribing to the channel, leave a comment below, or you're welcome to email me at thecarcarenut@gmail.com. I respond to every single comment and every single question and every single email personally, so don't hesitate to ask a question. May the Lord bless you and keep you, and I wish you the best with your Highlander purchase or ownership. You have a wonderful day.